All right, the nutrition facts label. The nutrition facts label is a source of information for sure, but it also tends to be very misleading. And I'm going to explain why in this video. So, from my research, the nutrition facts label, as we know it, came into existence in 1990. Okay. And so, um, or actually maybe even a little bit after that. According to this article on fastcompany.com, it's been found on nearly every packaged food product in the United States since 1994. So somewhere around there is when the nutrition facts label came out. And if you know anything about it, I'm sure most people pay attention to it, some level of attention. It talks about the percent daily value of various nutrients, macronutrients. And when I say macro, I mean like some of the bigger ones that aren't so drilled down, like fat, protein, and carbohydrates. And then also micronutrients like vitamin A and vitamin D and magnesium and stuff like that. Okay. Now, why do I say that the nutrition facts label is misleading? It's misleading for a few reasons. So, first of all, and so don't get me wrong, it's not to say that it's not helpful, but it's misleading. Um, so first of all, if you're familiar with the term, well, let me not get into details yet. The nutrition facts label can be pretty misleading because it tends to be so focused, nutrient focused, and I say versus diet focused. And I use the word diet carefully because diet has been so misused um, in our society. When we think diet, we think about some sort of book that you get where you eat a certain meals for a period of time. That's not really what I mean. I mean just like the general way that a person eats overall. So, nutrient focus means this. When you are more nutrient focused, it sounds good, but it's problematic because you will base the quality of a food on just a few key nutrients. Like I say, maybe on the amount of carbs, the amount of fat, total fat, the amount of protein, the amount of vitamin C or whatever. Now, that can be okay to a degree, but the big issue is that a food cannot be so simply reduced according to a few of its small parts. So, for instance, cabbage. Now, cabbage is found in the produce section typically, and it's not gonna. And I'm talking about like a head of cabbage. It's not gonna have a food label on it. At least not usually. Uh, but we know that produce is good for us. Let's kind of like not be concerned too much right now about all the pesticides that might be on conventionally grown. That's another topic. However, cabbage is known to be um it's known to be high in a variety of nutrients. Very high in fiber, very high in selenium. I think it is. Is it selenium? Or I may be thinking about sulfur. It's very high in various compounds that help to protect against cancer, prevent cancer. Vitamin K, um, vitamin C, and so on and so forth. Very high in different things like that. However, cabbage is beneficial to us also for reasons that people are still finding out. It's not just because of the nutrients we know about, it's also because of nutrients that we don't really know about. It's a lot more to cabbage than just the vitamin K or the fiber. It's the thing as a whole. Your body knows what to do with it whenever you eat it. And then um, it happens to have very, very high levels of good things that are good for the human body. Okay. Now, let's take a packaged food like, um, let me go to like Sunny Delight or something like that. Now, if you're familiar with Sunny Delight. Um, Sunny Delight is what I thought what I thought of back in the day as like a some sort of special orange juice, but it's not really that. I think it may have some orange juice in it, but it also has like oil and other kind of stuff. It's just like it's just some sort of drink that has all kind of things in it. Now, you look at Sunny Delight, if I'm not mistaken, and I should have pulled something up here, but Sunny Delight is one of those kind of drinks that says it has vitamin C in it. Now, if it's in there, if I'm not mistaken, it is enriched. It is added to it. But considering the fact that a food, a drink, or whatever is not just reduced to like one or two small ingredients or parts of it, there's a lot of stuff in that drink that is not good for you. And so the issue is when you look at a nutrition label for something like that and you see 100% vitamin C, then you might think you're doing good and you're not really doing good because when you take the thing a as a whole, it has a lot of things in it that are like detrimental to the human body. Okay? And so that's what I mean when I say nutrition facts label can be very misleading. So let me go into a few more specifics here. So first of all, percent daily value. Okay. So the percent daily value on a nutrition facts label is specifically how much a specific nutrient that has been pointed out contributes to a 2,000 calorie diet. Now, that whole term 2,000 calorie diet um, is based on um, something that essentially the FDA came up with. According to this Fast Company article, it says that the FDA was about to use 2,350 calories as a baseline, but they got pushback for that. So then they kind of rounded it down to 2,000 calories, hoping that that would kind of that round down would kind of encourage American people to not overeat or something like that. Now, again, this is what they say. So it's just kind of like a round number. It's somewhat of a just picked out of the thin air number, somewhat. But also consider this: it's supposed to be some average, so to speak, for like the average person. But the average person does not necessarily fit the 2,000 calorie um, frame, if you will. Some people may thrive off of less than that. Some people may thrive off of way more than that. And so that's another issue with the nutrition facts label. Depending on how you read it, because it's generalized, but you can't really do too much of generalization with the human population, then it can make you feel once again like you're doing good, that you're getting certain kind of quotas that you need that aren't necessarily for you. So understand that when you see percent daily value, it's based on a standardized human, which I don't. I was trying to find where I got this from, but years ago I remember hearing that this standard human was like a 150-pound male or something like that. All of us are not 150-pound men, and so that's so I'm just saying that to say it's important to understand kind of like more so where that comes from. Again, don't quote me on that 150-pound male thing because I wasn't able to find again where I got that from. But that's what I remember seeing somewhere back in the day. Okay. All right. So now what else? So when you see percent daily value, according to FDA definition, 5% daily value is considered low, like 5% and below. 20% and above is considered high. Again, this is based on the 2,000 calorie diet. So that's important to understand when you see things on nutrition facts labels and even ingredients labels, these things have very specific definitions. That very specific, everything is defined and kind of regulated. So it's important to understand that too. Now, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty details. When you look at total fat on a food label, This is talking about all kinds of fat in a food. So you got saturated fat, you have polyunsaturated fat, monounsaturated fat, trans fat. All of these are included in total fat. Now, the thing to understand is that not all fats are created equal. When I was coming up in the 90s, fat was considered evil, all of it. And so we were encouraged to try to cut out of our diets as much as possible. Okay? All kinds of fat. It turns out, people found out later, all fats are not created equal. You actually need substantial amounts of fat, depending on the type, in your diet for optimal health. Remember, if you haven't heard me say this before, your brain, I think, is 60 to 70% fat, with an emphasis on omega-3 fats, omega-3 fatty acids. And so you need and then it comprises a lot of the your cell walls and stuff like that throughout your body. You need fat. So when you see total fat zero, a lot of times, like based on how I grew up, if you grew up in my time, you thought you were doing good, but you're not necessarily doing good. Now, you may need to be a little careful with saturated fat, which I've even heard saturated fat is not necessarily as bad as people have thought, depending on where it comes from. Um, but I'm not gonna get into all that right now. But the really bad fat, of course, is trans fat, which is, essentially like a man-made fat where people take, vegetable oil and they'll push hydrogen into it. It increases the shelf life, but it also lays down in your arteries and can kind of cause hardening of the arteries and stuff like that. That's bad fat, and that's included in total fat as well. But all fat is not created equal. You do need a decent amount of fat. It just has to be the right kinds of fat. Okay. So that's why that on the nutrition label, total fat, needs to be scrutinized. You can't look at that and see, oh, it's low, I'm doing good, or whatever. Trans fat. The thing I want you to understand about that now, there was a big uproar 15, 20 years ago about that, and rightfully so. Like I just said, trans fat, also known as hydrogenated fat, is fat that has been modified by pushing hydrogen into it, and it makes a liquid vegetable oil into more of like a almost like a lard or tallow or something like that. So it increases the shelf life of it, but again, it actually makes it quite harmful to the human body. Now, when all that stuff went down about trans fat, then a lot of companies scrambled to take it out of their foods. Now, everything is FDA defined. And so people may have either taken it out or they reduced it enough that they could say 0 grams of trans fat on their label. Because according to FDA definition, if a food has less than 0.5 grams of trans fat, you can say that there's none in there. You can say 0 grams. And the way you know that a food still has trans fat, even if it says 0 grams, is by looking at the ingredient list and looking for hydrogenated oil or partially hydrogenated oil. That's a way that you know that it still has trans fat in it, but they can say 0, but it's still there. It's important to understand that. All right. What else? Total sugar. Now, remember that sugar, whenever people talk about sugar, they're talking about not just like added sugar, like table sugar, like what is it, like sucrose, but it also includes um sugars that are natural to the food, and any added sugar. So that's sucrose, fructose. I always forget whether it's fructose or fructose. I think it's fructose. Glucose, honey, brown sugar, agave nectar, maple syrup, and so on. Now, think about natural sugar versus added sugar. Natural sugar is a big difference. Natural sugar, for example, inside of an apple, is not going to have the same effect on your blood sugar, so to speak, as the sugar in a Coca-Cola, because of the fact that that sugar in the apple is naturally occurring. It's inside of the package of the apple, which includes the fiber and whatever else, that when you consume it, it's not going to cause nearly as much of a spike because it's moderated by everything else that's inside of that apple. It comes as a whole complete package. So it's not going to affect your body the same way as when you drink that soda and it's just pure sugar that hits your bloodstream really fast, no fiber, no stuff like that. And then that will spike your blood sugar and do all the kind of stuff and be detrimental. Natural sugar, in the case of a whole food, is different than added sugar. Now, if you're talking about apple juice, that sugar may be natural as well. However, this has been extracted from the fruit. And so now, in that case, the natural sugar is almost just as bad or pretty much just as bad as added sugar. Um, because that juice has been extracted from the fruit, so it doesn't have whatever other stuff that would moderate how it affects your body. Okay, so that's important to understand as well. And there also happens to be some difference between, like, for example, sucrose versus fructose. The effect on your body as well. I need to do some more research on that, but I've definitely heard a lot about that too. Total carbohydrates. Now, old carbs, old carbs. Now, the thing to understand is this: not all carbs are the same. Why? Because when you see total carbohydrates on the label, it's not just talking about sugar, for example. It's talking about sugars, starches, and fiber. All of these are considered carbohydrates, but they're not all equal. Okay? So, we talked a little bit about sugar already. That's going to be included in those grams of carbohydrates. Starches, you may have known that as well, that those are considered carbohydrates as well. Starches that you find in like grains and and potatoes and whatnot. There's a similar effect. But again, it depends on if that starch is inside of the food, like naturally occurring, or if it's extracted from the food. When it's extracted, it's very similar to sugar in regard to the effects on the body. Fiber, on the other hand, which is considered a carbohydrate, doesn't necessarily have the same effect. Matter of fact, fiber a lot of times, especially inside of the food, but even outside, blunts the response of blunts the effect of sugar um or starch or whatever on the bloodstream, like, so that it's not necessarily spiking your insulin and all that stuff the way it would if you didn't have the presence of fiber. And also, some fiber is not even um digestible. It's called non-soluble fiber, but it actually has a beneficial effect on the digestive system by helping um stuff move through your intestines, and also helping produce a healthy microbiome, like beneficial bacteria in your in your bowel, in your digestive system. So it's important to understand that even when you see carbs, you're not necessarily looking at everything that you think you are. And then finally, total sodium. A lot of times when we're trying to get our blood pressure lower, the first thing we think about is, I guess I got to lower that sodium. Sodium, total sodium, consists of not just the salt that you put, you know, on your food from the shaker or whatever. But it can be like sea salt or whatever. It can also be baking soda, which is sodium bicarbonate. It can also be monosodium glutamate or sodium benzoate. I think it's benzoate. But anyway, total sodium. It's all sodium. Okay. And so, the typical sodium that we think of is salt, which is sodium chloride. I remember that from chemistry. But it's important to understand all of that is sodium. Now, as far as like whether stuff like baking soda or whatever um has similar effect, I don't know, and so I'm not going to say anything like that here. Um, but that's something to do research on. It's important to understand that all comprises total sodium. Okay, so I think the moral of the story is this: what I said at the beginning. A food cannot, the worth of a food cannot be determined by just singling out a few key small nutrients because, you know, again, a food can actually be very good, but then because of the nutrients they pointed out, it might be low in vitamin C, but it could be high in, I don't know, vitamin B6. You know, a bad food can seem great, but I mean, yeah, because they pointed out vitamin C, vitamin A, or whatever. But they could have just added that on top of a bad food, of a food that, when taken as a whole, is actually bad for you. So it's important to understand what you're eating. And again, if you notice, food in the produce section doesn't typically have a nutrition label, but it's going to be generally good for you anyway. Period. Or even lean meats and stuff like that. Not going to necessarily have a nutrition label, but it just goes to show you that you're going to do great if you just focus on eating natural food, as natural as possible, as processed as little as possible. Okay. Let me know what you guys think about this video and what you think about nutrition labels and whatnot. Make sure you share it too, because somebody who you know may actually be benefited by this. As we get older, it becomes increasingly important to maintain and build muscle. Muscle helps you burn fat, stay mobile, and can contribute to longevity. However, many people have no idea how to work out to build muscle. My mini workout series on Patreon provides you with my body weight mini workout video library. These workouts use little to no equipment, which means that you can do them in the privacy of your own home. They start at beginner level and progress from there to ensure you continue to see results. Every workout is a full body workout, hitting chest, back, legs, and glutes, as well as other muscles in between. Become a patron today and receive access to my series of mini workouts, plus access to a digital copy of my book, 8 Weeks to Transform Your Diet and Your Health. By combining the workouts with healthy diet changes, as outlined in my book, you'll definitely be on your way to weight loss, improved health, and visible results. Join me at patreon.com/SeanB2B Fitness today.